Welcome to Collective SOULversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self-discovery. So whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective SOULversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey everybody, welcome to Collective SOULversations. I am your host, Jody Jones, and I have Darren Austin Hall in the house with us today. I'm super excited that he's back. We barely touched on a whole bunch of really exciting topics last time, and so as I was connecting before popping on with Darren and Spirit giving us, the guidance, they were throwing some pretty interesting topics into the mix. So I'm excited to discover that kind of playground with Darren today. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about him. Of course, go and check out the other video that we did with Darren. You can see it's in the podcasts. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about him so you know who he is, and then I'm going to bring him on and we're going to start our SOULversation. So, welcome Darren Austin Hall. He is a spiritual teacher, a sound channeler, a mystical musician, author, poet, and ecstatic dance DJ facilitator. He is the creator of Source Resonance Academy, devoted to leading sound healing training retreats, intensives, and workshops around the world to initiate others onto the path of using sacred sound as a medicine of the soul. He shares his legendary Sacred Sound Journey concerts around the world and is a renowned recording artist. His new double album, Honor All Creation, is a concept album of sound healing journey music, mystical folk, and ambient dance music devoted to the dawning of the new earth. It also consists of coinciding online course that charts a deep vision quest into the sacred wisdom of the earth and the great goddess. Honor All Creation, a New Earth Story. His new book, Love's Revolution, is an enthralling collection of writing, short stories, and poetry, which offers a captivating and provocative exploration of the burgeoning realm of sacred sexuality and the revisioning of intimate relationships as pathways of conscious partnership and embodied mysticism. And it's available worldwide on Amazon. Darren shares his wisdom warrior teachings on his YouTube channel, sharing spiritual perspectives and empowering knowledge. And Darren's also passionate about rectifying masculinity in a toxic world and has led many men's groups over the years. His Kings of the Heart online program takes men through a 6-week journey through the masculine archetypes of empowerment to inspire next level positive transformation in their lives. He is also the founder of Earth Night Men's Retreats. Darren also shares his Temple of the Wild Ecstatic Dance with cacao activations, donning his DJ Druid cap. He also shares next level shaking medicine sessions. And Darren is devoted to the re-enchantment of our world, restoring a sense of the magical beauty inherent to nature, reverence for Gaia, the goddess that is Earth, and stewarding a new golden age of universal truth, spiritual science, and unity consciousness. Welcome, 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 Darren. How are you?
I'm good. Wow, I am such a long-winded Gemini, aren't I, in those bios? Thank you for reading all of it.
I was just thinking, his bio reads a bit like a story, like a little a little bit of a novel. We could
Yeah,
go in there, and I like the journey of it. There are lots of
cool.
visuals.
I just know in this day and age, attention spans, like quick reels and TikTok videos.
I
I'm
know.
like definitely this ancient soul, and I refuse to like write, brief posts. I make these long-winded posts, but people like it, I think it's
Yeah, it's the it's all good because as I was reading it and spirits doing their their chime in as they do with they just said one note at a time. So apparently, what you're doing through the music that you're sharing, all of that, it's you are making some changes one note at a time. So that's
nice.
that's something to write about, definitely.
Great, great, great. I love it.
Yeah. So I want to just kind of jump into right now, because the timing of this. We've just finished the lunar eclipse, and then we've got the solar eclipse that's coming up. So we're in that intense period, right,
Hmm.
of the eclipse energy. And I wanted to know, first of all, and let our listeners know, do you consider yourself to be, and I have a part two to this question. So, do you consider yourself to be an energetically sensitive person? And if so, what's your intuition telling you about this particular eclipse season that we're in? And then I'll let you, and then I want to ask the part two of that.
Sure. Yeah, I do consider myself an energetically sensitive person. I mean, when I was younger, I think it showed up the most in just how appreciative I was of music and art. I remember being a teenager and just listening to such beautiful, moving music. Music's been kind of my barometer for my sensitivity. And I remember my mother, bless her, she's always been a supporter of my writing and my music. And I remember just her telling me from a wee old age, that I was a very sensitive soul. And of course, when you get into spirituality, and I practice yoga, I used to teach yoga. A lot of these art forms, Qigong comes to mind as well, studying Reiki. A lot of these things resensitize us as well because, I lived in Toronto in a city for a long time, and the challenge of modern living, especially in urban environments, is there's so much dissonance, like loud noises, and now with all the 5G stuff, there's so much radiation.
Hmm.
And what it tends to happen is it makes a lot of tension in the body. And the body is necessary for sensitivity. It's a sensual experience, of our senses growing their capacity. And we listen with our full body. Our skin, has cells that are very similar to the auditory cells that make us able to listen with our ears. So yes, I do feel that there's a sensitization that continues to happen with myself and anyone who's on an authentic spiritual path. And yeah, we're in very intense, times, and I think it shows that more and more people are resensitizing themselves as they live lives that are more filled with wellness and really getting into the evolutionary work that spirituality is about. And hence why I'm so happy to see so many more people speaking about the eclipses and the
Hmm.
astrology. It seems that there's like a real collective understanding that these ancient sciences truly need to be reclaimed en masse. And even on a more baseline level, it's not even the intention to reclaim. I think just people love it. They want meaning, and
Right.
astrology really delves into all this deep meaning.
Yeah, and it provides connection, right? It gives them that kind of like faith that there is something bigger than just,
Mm-hmm.
this human experience that we're having for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, do you feel like this? I mean, I love it when people, will talk about the eclipse season and they'll do the post and they do. And I suppose if you're kind of new to exploring all this, it would feel like it's something new. But we go through this cycle, like we're just literally in a repetitive cycle of all these different, so this exact same time last year, we were going through this exact same kind of energy, although for some reason, this energy feels much different to me this
Mm-hmm.
time round.
Mm-hmm.
It feels much larger, much grander. It feels like it's having more of a spin on the collective energy.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been picking up anything on that or a change
Oh,
or difference?
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in cycles, but the cycles are spiraling, right? So it's like history repeats itself, but because it's spiraling, it's like you reach it at a new octave, So musically, we could say eclipse season is like, I don't know, I'll just throw out an F sharp note, on a piano.
Yeah.
But next year, it'll be the same F sharp, but maybe it'll be higher up on the piano. So like a faster vibration.
Yeah.
That's spiral dynamics. That's how, everything really evolves in the universe. This beautiful paradox of like the newness of things, but also the cycle, and that's why the spiral is a powerful thing. But of course, since the last eclipse season of 2024, I mean, there's been some massive shifts in the world, and there are bigger cycles upon cycles. I follow Barbara Handclough, one of my favorite astrologers, and she just posted her spring equinox reading, and she was saying that there is certain research saying that we're actually also witnessing the end of another cycle from our, beautiful friends in India and the Vedic sages, this Kali Yuga, this like
Right.
26,000-year-old cycle. Now, I spoke to other people who are really into, Indian time and cosmology, and they didn't seem to think it was the end of the Kali Yuga, but just highlighting that there are all these other cycles, and now that we're
Mm-hmm.
such a global culture, it's so interesting to see the interweavings of this. And then, of course, there's the cycle of the age of Aquarius, and then there's that
Right.
other meta cycle of Pluto and Aquarius for the next 20 years. So it's really interesting just to see all these things. But things feel very potent on Earth right now, and our awakening process, I think, because we don't even know how really consciousness works, especially collectively, but this idea of consciousness becoming a coherent entity, when more humans start to have the same perspectives, the same experiences, consciousness interweaves, it's interdependent, and there's that whole idea of critical mass. And I was saying years ago with this whole phenomena that once a certain small percentage of the population gets it on some level, everyone else just magically gets it. You're probably familiar with this theory by
Yeah, it's the
critical
ripple
mass,
effect for
the
sure.
ripple effect. And I said years ago, we're actually in that liminal space of that exponential thing now. Where we're just like going into this like almost hyper speed, and people speak about this all the time, like, oh, time seems to be doing all these weird things, like it speeds
Right.
up and then it slows down.
Yeah.
And yeah, because all of this is woven together, time, consciousness. So it's a marvelous time to be alive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. And I, do my best. But somebody who's energetically sensitive, I feel like,
Mm,
I feel like at this point in my journey, I'm able to, step out of the fear of it, step out of the density of it, and recognize the power within it. But I
mm-hmm,
can honestly say, as somebody who's energetically sensitive and somebody who's an empath, and, I get that I'm, not your average bear because not everybody channels spirit all of the time and has
mm-hmm,
all of those channels open. But this kind of energy it can be really challenging, like, especially
mm-hmm,
on the vibrational aspect of the human body. And especially if we have a lot of unresolved trauma, a lot of unresolved wounds, right? And Spirit has just been showing me lately, it's like, we have all these layerings of frequency in our body that kind of like hold stories, they're energetically imprints.
mm-hmm,
And I feel like these big energy systems come in to help us move it, right? And you would totally 100% get this because you do this with your music, right? You need the
mm-hmm,
ecstatic
mm-hmm,
dance when you guys are doing that. You guys are moving your bodies and using the music to create some movement, which leads me to that next question about that. So somebody who's energetically sensitive and, how do you manage to be in these groups of people where, and you guys will have to check out Darren's stuff because the videos are amazing, the music is beautiful, I love being able to watch it from the comfort of my own home though, because I would honestly, I would not be able to energetically be in person in that.
mm.
And I've tried, trust me, I've tried to go to the retreats, I've tried to sit in the drumming circles, I've tried to do and how do you do it? How do you not get completely overwhelmed energetically when you go there? How do you not get drained? How do you not? Because here's the thing, and I want you to touch on this. I
Mm-hmm,
find that when would go to those retreat like things, where communities coming together, that's beautiful. I love that whole, I have this vision in my mind of like what it'll be like. And then I go there and it will be a lot of broken souls, a
mm-hmm.
lot of really damaged souls that are
Yeah,
looking for a messiah, looking for a miracle, looking for a, you know,
yeah,
and as somebody who's energetically sensitive, they just like they're like flies to, honey. They're just
yep.
So let me know, how do you manage to, transverse that whole world and not come out, in a scrambled ball?
Ah, well, yeah, I mean, you raise a very good point. And I mean, I'll tell you that there's a lot of festivals that I've been a part of over the years, and as I get older and more sensitive, I realize that I'm not a huge fan of the big festival scene anymore. As conscious as they are. There's a big festival in Costa Rica called Envision that I've been honored to play at quite a few times at this point, and it is still a very enriching experience because when you have like, I mean, this one's quite big. It's like 8 to 10,000 people.
Wow.
When you have that many people together in the same space who are, for the most part, at least interested in consciousness and
Hmm.
spirituality, there's a remarkable field of energy that's created. I mean, people experience telepathy, synchronicities. Uh, the workshops that I teach are always at a higher level because everyone already understands like the vernacular, the vocabulary. So I can just
Right,
I
right.
can just dive deeper, more jokes, more lightness.
Yeah.
Um, but what I found is last year when I was at Envision, at around 10 at night, I just bailed. I would just go for the day, the workshops, be with my friends, and then 10 at night, all the big stages open up, all this crazy
Right.
electronic music.
Yeah.
And I just, and there wasn't even a sense of FOMO. I would just like say a prayer to the land, thank you for the day, and then I would just walk out as all these like crazy party goers were coming in and
Right.
just went back to my cushy place. I was in a beautiful shared house with a bunch of Toronto tribe and didn't have any anxiety about, oh, next day, maybe I'll sleep in, maybe I'll head in at 1. Whereas in years past when I was younger, I'd be like, oh, I got to go to this artist and this, and I'd be like kind of in this more masculine, organized scheduling of things, and I wouldn't listen, to my sensitivity. I'd just
Yeah.
be powering through these things.
Right.
So there's that. And then the other thing that I've done in my life as I become more output, more service in the world, is I take sabbaticals every year, where I just unplug. And I've been blessed to be living in many different places in the world. Costa Rica is my primary hub, but I also consider Scotland, I also consider the Isle of Corfu in Greece a hub. And those are places that I can go do a few events and then actually like just stay in a friend's home or rent a place for like a month and just focus on like writing, working on another book or artistic stuff. Not stuff that's going to be like really in a pressure cooker,
Hmm.
and just resting, and spending time in nature is so key. I just spend so little time in cities. I just tour and go into a city, and then for the most part, like in Scotland, I stay at my friend's retreat center, and I just allow nature, nature time now more than ever. I keep saying this in my writings and in my talks online. As our planet is going through this incredible galactically prophesized time of awakening, of quickening, and it is intense. I was like, yeah, it's a marvelous time to be alive, but I say that knowing it's also really intense.
Right.
Um, and I keep telling people spend more time in nature, like way more time in nature, consciously, intentionally, going to the oceans, going to the forest. An indigenous teacher told me many years ago after I did a vision quest in Canada, every day you should be spending at least a few minutes at a nearby park hanging with Mother Earth. And he kind of said it stridently like this, your life depends on it,
Right.
because it's not just our bodies are sensitive, our psyches, and psychologically, that's probably even more of the turbulence that people are feeling right now because we are moving through into unity consciousness, but it's an alchemical process. We have to go through this bifurcation first. We have to split off. And the people who want the unity are going to rise up, and the people who are still like so committed to seeing division, duality, they're going to kind of densify into an even more emphatic experience of that. And you're seeing that on the planet. It's just this it's like sometimes I talk to people and I'm like, wow, like they're just totally on a whole other planet of belief systems and having compassion for each other is very key because we don't want to be warring with each other anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, taking those times to rest, having good boundaries if you are going out to big events, and just yeah, just honoring, your inner truth, making sure that you're checking in. What do I need? What is my heart telling me to need? And fearlessly following that guide. If it's like, hey, you need some rest and you need to like not go to that festival, then we really have to listen to our intuition now more than ever.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, for me again, speaking from, my ascension experiences, is that the whole thing is, learning how to develop a different relationship with yourself. And I feel
Mm,
like that also, um the whole energy around the Kali Yuga, the whole, that kind of very turbulent energy. It's, to me it feels very much like about creating that space for yourself, holding that space for yourself, as you kind of like watch the world around you kind of crumble and fall and destroy itself and turn into chaos. Again, it's, that going within. And it's interesting because I feel like so many people that are on the spiritual path, the spiritual journey, they go to the retreats, they're doing the, the ceremonies, they're doing all that stuff. I feel like it's a very still an outward experience. Do you feel like that? Like there's, and this is interesting because again,
totally.
and I'm not to, to down the spiritual community, the ascension community. But again, the intention is good. Everybody comes into this with like, because I know I have some stuff I need to work on. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to heal this.
Mm,
But it's always been my experience that those kind of soul travelers, again, it's like their stuff is very close to the surface. Like it's
mhm.
very, it spews out very, very easily, right? Like
Yes.
there's a lot of emotional energy around them, which I'm sure you've witnessed people crying and screaming and moaning and
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes all that ceremony stuff, though, can be such a distraction, such
Hmm.
a like, I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to here. I'm going to do the retreat. We're going to do the cacao ceremony. We're going to do, but I feel like again it's all outside and it's not inside. Like it's
Hmm.
just, and I feel like we're getting pushed into that now. Like we're really getting pushed into the put the books away, put the videos away, put the ceremonies away. It's just you. You
Mm.
and your whole experience that you've been carrying inside your vessel. Are you feeling that kind of?
For sure. We're in such resonance, I'm glad you're bringing this up because I've always kept some of this more like psychedelic mystical side of spirituality at arm's distance because I just remember when I had my awakening over 20 years ago, there wasn't, this mainstream spiritual culture. And my doorway in was through very traditional practices, Zen meditation, studying the Vedic, the sages, the Upanishads, the Vedas, yoga, um, and books like The Power of Now, which is Zen Buddhism extrapolated through kind of a Western perspective masterfully through Eckhart Tolle.
Right.
I wrote about this recently, I think, in my blog. I'm really feeling that we are, in lieu of what you're saying, total resonance. It's about getting back to basics right now.
Mhm.
Getting back to presence, getting back to like, where's your attention span? Getting back to like, are you meditating every single day? Are you having that just maintenance of yourself, of your psyche? Because now that spirituality has gone mainstream, the challenge there is the mainstream is very much controlled by the profit, margin. It's very capitalistic. Social media has kind of enabled a low level kind of narcissism in everyone, and everyone's vying to like have more followers. And there's still this idea in the world that success is, has something to do with like monetary, making a lot of money, on a
Mhm.
level. And so what that's doing is it's causing people, I think, to skip steps, to seek out provocative teachings rather than the ones that are more basic and simple. And it is causing people to more chase, the mystical experiences of the upper chakras, because those ones are easy, and
Right.
I know people
Yes.
will say, well, drinking ayahuasca is very challenging. Yeah, I mean, I've drank ayahuasca. It's a very challenging experience. But at the same time, like sitting with your stuff, sitting with your shit, sitting with your shadow projections, being in an intimate relationship with someone, just being more emotionally, contained and mature and really and just sitting with yourself, spending
Mhm.
more time in self-reflection. That to me is the tougher work. And there's a lot of spiritual bypassing happening and a lot of people just chasing experiences and not chasing like the slow path of true moral ethical change, which spirituality really is about. And I feel that we need more of that. And I'm definitely feeling my work is wanting to position itself to be more in that style of offering more longer curriculum in teaching so that people can
Hmm.
really graduate through basic to more advanced levels. Because nowadays, you can just like dive into the most advanced esoteric arts without any proper teacher or anything because
Right.
it's just all online.
Right.
So it is getting, quite messy. And then, on the biggest zoom out view, it is all part of this process. It's like a collective awakening, and
Hmm.
it's not going to be so clean, I think.
Right.
But I think more and more people will realize that, after hundreds of mystical experiences, have they really changed? Have they really transformed? And what is true spirituality? What is meditation? What is presence? These things really need to be defined, and perhaps even through a lifetime of work, and I'm feeling this call to definitely get back to basics. And it started with my own life. Started
Right.
rereading Eckhart Tolle, amping up my meditation, just being more present. Um, and that's been very fruitful for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like everybody has to have their kind of own unique path. It's not a cookie cutter, like, here's how you ascend, as a soul. But I feel like, it is because of the world that we live in, because of the technology that we have, the advancements that we have. It, like you're saying, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, everybody wants short, sweet, quick. Give it to me now. Like
Yeah.
I want the experience now. And I even find this with clients. So, like, even, and I mean, to a certain degree, even something as basic as meditation can be used as an escape. Like, you know what I
Totally.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
for somebody like myself, it's always been much easier for me to get out of the body and go into the spirit world and communicate with spirit in the spirit realm. It's always been much easier for me to do that because being in the body has been uncomfortable my whole life. So that's a great escape.
Hmm.
And I my physical body got really sick 2 years ago, like completely because I was, seeing so many clients, doing so many readings, doing all of that stuff, but I was out of the body for the majority of it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that huge disconnect happened. So this kind of, revelation that I've come into is like, getting to know, again through the body, but not in the, as in the, as, the aesthetics of the body, but of the vibrational frequencies of the body. And I
Hmm.
recognize now when I work with clients that so many of them, when I'm doing the medical mediumship and spirits, picks up the stuff about the physical body, but then goes right away into the emotional aspect of it, and then shows us that there's a huge, disconnect, body mind disconnect.
Hmm.
And you talk to clients about this, and they have no clue what that even means. Like, it's like,
Hmm.
how do I do this? Like, it's easy for
Yeah.
me to go on a cleanse and stop eating meat and, and go exercise and do that. But what do you mean? Like, how do I how do I connect with
Yeah,
that,
for
version
sure.
of me, right?
Well, this is, and it's interesting because, before we started recording, we were talking a bit about AI. And, I'm very interested in this issue of AI and technology because what all of this is highlighting, and you mentioned it, is this mind-body disconnect. And this is something that we need to realize where we are in modern culture at this stage in our evolution. We are carrying significant traumas and significant blind spots. We have been so persecuted, so severed from our traditions that we're, as one teacher called it in a very harrowing description, we're ignorant of our ignorance. Like we have no idea how far back this goes. The disembodiment culture, if you look at the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they're all very based, at least how it became institutionalized, this patriarchal kind of worldview, that there's something immaculate about the thinking mind, but the body, the flesh, the savagery of our animal instincts, it's seen with a level of disdain.
Right.
Even the earth is seen with a level of disdain. In
Right.
fact, those three religions have a kind of Armageddon prophecy that there's going to be this holy war at the end of time, and all these, different factions of God-fearing people are going to fight it out, and the chosen victors will ascend to this kind of heavenly height, and the earth will burn in hellfire, with all the infidels. And this is kind of like the script,
Right.
chillingly,
Yeah.
that seems to be being
Playing out.
followed by, yeah,
Yeah.
by our governments and such.
Right.
So
Right.
we have, and then if you go before the rise of Abrahamic religions, if you go back to the goddess worshiping cultures, which we don't know a lot about because they were so, destroyed, so
Right.
genocided, so methodically wiped out.
Right.
We have enough remnants to understand that these were people who didn't develop weapons for thousands of years, for example. They were egalitarian cultures where men and women were co-creating culture and society in partnership, not simply romantic partnership, just like working creative partnership.
Right. Yeah.
And I think right now we're having a re-revelation of these times because as much as history has done a very good job, his story, of severing us, as we become more energetically sensitive, we're realizing that consciousness is actually stored in the ethers, in the energy, in the Akash. And people get all these downloads all the time now because as we get more sensitive, we're literally taking out books from this Akashic library. And people are starting to have these memories come back to them.
Hmm.
Atlantis, for example, a lot of the esoteric people from Rudolf Steiner, Helena Blavatsky, they speak about how we're in an age now with technology, with things like AI, where we're recycling
Right.
Atlantic karma. And a lot of the people who were involved in the fall of Atlantis have been reincarnated. Some of us might even be them to hopefully, choose a better timeline than what was chosen before. And this is all about being in connection with the wisdom that is in the body, that is in nature. When you divorce yourself from the body and you just go into the mind, which is what all modern science is based on, Rene Descartes said it, I think, therefore I am. We abstract ourselves from the body. We don't realize that we're missing the true anchoring into true sanity and balance, which is being here on earth, being balanced with the wisdom goddess, who is said to be the planet Earth.
Right.
And lo and behold, we've gone collectively insane. We're destroying our planet. If you really just take an objective observation, as Eckhart Tolle does in The Power of Now, right in the beginning of that book, he's like, we are a species that has gone insane. And we need to have that sobering feedback really hit us to then start to try and like, okay, well, how do we create sanity then in the midst of
Hmm.
this?
Yeah. And it feels like that's kind of like where we are. It's like that, you know, uh, I just it's the death and destruction. It's the whole, the chaotic energy of where we are. And I feel like it's like when spirit gives you like gentle nudges towards things, like the gentle, like, here, this
Mhm.
would help you, this would support you, but we often miss that, so it just becomes then the, like, the hitting us over the head with the frying pan. I feel like the entire collective energy is getting the frying pan over the head right now.
And then Pluto, is like the last boss,
Right.
who's just like the Lord of the Underworld in the 12th house of the astrology, who's just like, okay, you didn't get it, change or die. I'm just gonna make it really clear.
That's
And,
right.
and we're in that collectively right now. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you can feel it, again, somebody who's energetically sensitive, you can feel it and you can see, the
Mm,
people around you spiraling out of control. You do
wow, it's crazy.
understand. I mean, we talk about the ripple effect when we do the work and stuff it has, but the ripple effect works the other way as well. It's like,
100%.
that the
100%.
duality on this planet, there's, the craziness of it is that, the ripple effect comes the other way, where we're feeling that, the chaotic energy and pulling in. I know for me, and let me let our listeners know, I have it's interesting because, of course, Spirit was, 4 o'clock this morning. They were, that's when they want to, get my book written and give me all my stuff. And they were showing me just the activity in the human body. So it's very interesting. They showed the human body, and each human body being its own planet.
Mm,
And then they showed the whole, the pathogen activity. So the parasites, the bacteria, the viruses, the heavy metals, all of the stuff existing in your planet, in your particular planet.
Hmm.
And then they showed these, the big energy coming in, so that, in the outer world, the big energy coming in with the eclipse energy, the moon, the sun, all of that stuff. And it literally causing like a tsunami like energy in the physical body, right?
Yeah.
Which we probably don't notice all of the time because we're busy. We're on autopilot. We're going to work. We're doing podcasts. We're talking to clients. We're doing all that stuff. But that whole thing is happening. That environment is happening. And so what's happening now is all of the bugs in the body are scrambling. They're literally, they're
Mm.
scrambling, and there's that chaotic energy. And it was interesting because they showed me that in each world, in each body world, there will be stronger systems and weaker systems. And so, wherever your weaker system is, so, and just like if we compared it to the planet Earth, well, here's a more thriving part of the world, and here's a part that's not doing well. Same thing, we will have more activity in those particular areas, which then relates into us feeling it on a physical level. So if it
Hmm.
shows up as headaches for you or digestive stuff or whatever that may be, but they were showing like that massive amount of energy going on, right? And and in a
Yeah.
sense, we are the creators of that world because
Yeah.
we feed it through our own energy. We
Yeah.
are the mother Gaias of our own planet, and they
Yeah.
showed that. So do you have this awareness, like when we're going through these cycles of, because that's to me is like, we talk about getting to know thyself and really getting to know who I am, and that relationship. I feel like
Hmm.
having the awareness of everything that your being holds is paramount.
Everything you're being hold?
Holds like everything, so everything in your world, in your planet, right, in your body, in your physical body, having the awareness of everything, that all the inhabitants that are
Ah,
co-creating
yeah,
within you, right?
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, what I feel, we are like transducers, we are literally receiving cosmic energy and transforming it. And we're in this rapport with Mother Earth. The Gnostics spoke about this in the Nag Hammadi library about how humanity is interwoven in this big cosmic drama with Mother Earth, who is said to be a star goddess who fell from the center of the galaxy to give us a home compassionately because she designed us, actually. It's a whole mythological story. But we are very much in this supportive relationship with her where we are helping to translate and transduce cosmic energies that are coming through. And that's why, there's all these downloads happening right now because, some people say we're actually moving into this powerful stellar alignment with the center of the galaxy right now. So we're receiving this huge like source upgrade, this remembrance. Christ consciousness, for example, the Gnostics say the energy of Christ is a remembrance of what we
Right.
truly are as humanity. And
Right.
one of the biggest problems right now on the planet, and AI is really highlighting this, is we've forgotten who we are. Most people have no idea what is it here, what's our origins. And
Right.
that's a very dangerous place to be because that makes us very easily manipulatable. And this is what the Gnostics said in a very clear way as well. But another thing I'll say about all of this energy coming through and everything you're describing, like the intensities and all the blocks and all the things inside of our body being very highlighted from all of this, it is a time to really initiate all of this deeper work, that we're talking about. And one thing that's been very clear to me is that because we've been so cut off from our bodies and we've been so disembodied, and there's so much trauma that's being held in the body mind, continuum, one of the most profound things that we need to do is we need to reclaim the sexual creative force. The force of loving, of truly being in intimacy with each other, with ourselves, because this energy is one of the initial wounds that caused us to be disembodied. We see this highlighted in the story of the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve fell. And from that point on, patriarchy pretty much blamed women en masse for causing this fall from paradise. The
Right.
first thing that happened is they covered their naked bodies with shame. They covered their genitalia. There was a shaming of sexuality that happened.
Mm-hmm.
You see this as one of the hallmarks of kind of the dis-ease, the pathology of the psychological pathology of a lot of these eventually very institutionalized colonial religions is that they saw sexuality as kind of with disdain. And
Right.
there's no coincidence that places like the Vatican are absolute vortices for predatory sexuality. You know,
Right.
the
And they're all
you've
and their
got
bodies are covered in robes, completely covered in. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's all men and all
Yeah.
of this stuff. And I actually had a download last year when I was in Corfu, because in the island of Corfu in Greece, which is said to be a very potent energetic place,
Mhm.
there's an island just off the bigger island of Corfu, a small island called Dragon Island. It looks like a dragon. And people believe behind the island there's this kind of portal to Atlantis. There's these like crazy kind of rocky pillars that come out of the sea. And when we were taking this boat over there, I had a huge download about writing a book about Atlantis. And it was about how there was this bifurcation in Atlantis between two kind of sage-like classes, you know, where they had one class, which were people who were very reverent to nature, and men and women were always in these dedicated relationships because they understood the human being is truly this hermaphrodite. You know, ancient
Right.
esoteric writings say there's a time when human beings were more hermaphroditic, and then we were split, and the gender rift was
Right.
started.
Yeah.
And then there was this other caste of elites in Atlantis who chose to pretty much be alone, to be celibate, and then got very entrenched in technology because they became ungrounded. There's something about sexuality that enthuses the body. You know, I wrote this once that sexuality is actually the flower of embodiment. You know, it's the most enthused form that we can have of embodiment is in the throes of sexual pleasure. We can
Right.
surrender into that and feel this heightened energy that is significantly healing. And the last thing
Right.
I'll say on this is Edgar Cayce, the great American psychic and medium, said this years ago in probably the 1940s or 50s. He prophesied that in the current age that we're in now, there would come a time where the turbulence of modernity, the increasing frequencies would become so overwhelming that there would be kind of nervous system disorders en masse throughout the population, which we now see
We
proliferated
see.
with
Absolutely.
autoimmune disorders. All these things are rooted in a fundamental nervous system imbalance because we don't
Absolutely.
rest and restore enough. And he said the antidote will be that human beings will realize there is something about the sexual force that is actually about restoring our energy. It's not just about
Right.
pleasure and reproduction. There's a
Right.
higher expression of it that's very medicinal. And I
Right.
think that needs to come more forward now, and it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, and I think it is coming slowly and in like mainstream media kind of ways. As so, we're seeing a lot of somatic healing, right? We're seeing a lot of somatic touch, a lot of, again, the mind body connection, that, subtle things of just, running your fingers over your face, rubbing your hands to get this kind of, which could be, seen as being very sensual, right?
Hmm.
I mean, just me doing that, I get instant goosebumps all over my body. So it's definitely activating, the sensory parts of my body. And I
Absolutely.
feel like part of this, and they're just saying the part, then I don't know where this fits in because I'm, not a Vedic astrology professional or expert,
Right.
but they're saying that's part of the Kali Yuga, that coming in, like that death and destruction of the old way or the old way of doing
Yes.
things. So
Yes.
that breaking free of the, the body shaming, the,
Hmm.
and we need to get into the AI part of this because here's the thing, when we talk about online, you watch, I've got my children are all in their 20s, 18-year-old daughter, they're on TikTok, they're, on Snapchat. It's a very visually appealing world that they're in, right? Like it's very, this is what the female body looks like. This is how, and I find it so interesting because it's, we've been slammed with all of that stuff, all of that programming, and now more than ever, we're seeing more and more young people coming out being like, I don't even know what sex I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't,
Absolutely.
I'm not a she, I'm not a he. I'm like, and it's, you know, it's that technology that has created that distortion
Yeah.
in the field.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are, you know, in a very much like there is a timeline here where we're very much being captured. Our consciousness is being captured by a techno-tyrannical agenda.
Right.
And when I studied media information technoculture at university, that was my undergrad. I was studying AI and transhumanism almost 20 years ago at uni,
Yeah.
and I was, we're lucky to be alive as well in the generation that we are because we remember the world without the internet. It was
Right.
a different time, and we've seen in our lifetime this like faster and faster paced evolution of interfacing humanity with technology.
Hmm.
And, we need to start applying a certain moral compass here, some form of ethics, which is what true spiritual maturity is about. I know the
Right.
moral thing always brings up a lot with people because, let's face it, there's been a lot of shadowy morality projected onto humanity by forces of religious empire that are
Exactly.
very toxic. But inherently, if you look at the ancient sages, such as the Taoists, those who were more nature-based, who were more simplistic, who were more about like getting back to being in touch with the innate truth, the innate gnosis in the heart,
Right.
I would say that nature itself has a certain morality to it, and that if we're on a proper uh, evolutionary path with our spirituality, we should become more moral and ethical. Because, for
Hmm.
example, if we start to really see the body for what it is, this beautiful biological mystical vessel that houses our spirit, that gives us incarnation, but we
Hmm.
also soberly realize it's impermanent and that it has limitations, we should be caring for it. We should realize there are things in our life that if we put them into our bodies are bad for us. The ability to think between good and bad. Buddhism is very much about discerning, right action, right thinking. It's this discernment between right and wrong, which
Right.
we know as children, but then we come into adults and we all of a sudden there's this fantastical world where everything's very ambiguous. So with technology, the big thing that, I'm trying to highlight with people, in the talks that I'm giving on AI is that we have to realize foremost that a lot of the technological development that happens in our world is coming from the military. It comes from the military industrial
That's
complex.
interesting because I was it's just when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, and they were showing us the of course you're studying AI many years ago. And
Hmm.
I just had this like, do we even know like the actual origins of it? Like it's
Hmm.
I love the way we get this technology. It comes in our lap and 99% of the population doesn't even get it a second thought as to like who created this? where
Exactly.
who's the owner of this? Where did it come from? And so you're saying that it's coming from the military.
Yeah, so, and I think every human being, should be reading this beautiful book by David F. Noble, UFT professor, called The Religion of Technology. Because what he does in this book is he charts the rise of what we know as science in our modern era, which came
Hmm.
about in what was known as the Enlightenment period in the 17th century with the rise of like Francis Bacon, Rene Descartes, and it's based on what's known as empirical science. So it's very much like materialist science. Everything is matter, everything that I see is true. It completely severs us from any understanding of the metaphysical, of the ethereal. For example, most people don't know that if you study Eastern medicine, for example, Chinese medicine, they have a whole view on subtle energy. It's called qi or ki or reiki. And in the West, we also had this. It was called the pneuma, the spirit of life or the breath of life. But in the 17th century, these things were all of a sudden relegated to the dustbin because they were seen as superstitious mysticism, in a
Right.
way. Whereas in my conspiracy mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe there was people that wanted to disempower humanity and they saw the more mystical arts as being a very pure way that human beings empower themselves. So
Right.
let's shame it out in the open as like superstitious. Meanwhile, the elites are still practicing these arts. But
Right.
basically, the problem that happened was with the rise of materialist science, David F. Noble shows that there was a metastasization from the anti-nature hubris, the disembodied complex, the patriarchal paternal God complex that the Abrahamic faiths had been like basically weaponizing on the planet for thousands of years, that metastasized and got transferred into the burgeoning of Western science. This is one of the biggest blind spots that people have because people revere science as a kind of religion, especially we saw this
Right.
during the pandemic. Trust the science.
Right.
Well, wait a second here. What is science inherently? Science has a tremendous amount of flaws. The scientific method was made by Francis Bacon, who famously said, let us put Mother Nature on the rack and rape and torture her for her secrets. My God.
Right.
So, and then when you look in the 1950s and the 60s with the rise of computer technology, a lot of the funding for these innovations comes from bridlings of corporations with the military. You see this with the US government. There's like trillions of dollars that go into these black projects, these secret programs that are run by the Pentagon, which is the
Right.
military.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, poof, these technologies come out, like Facebook, for example. There was a completely analogous technology being developed by the US military. And all of a sudden they squashed the project, and like literally a year later, Facebook shows up with pretty much
Right.
the identical scheme, but with like a whole rebrand.
Yes.
So to me, we need to be very suspect of what's being put in front of us. We don't realize how submissive we are in our culture. We are not living in true democracies. We're not nearly as free as we'd like to think ourselves being. But they give
Right.
us this veil of all these things that
False
play with
sense. Yeah.
social media. Oh, I can express myself so purely and fully
Right.
in social media. But at the end of the day, you're paying taxes. If you try and create like a sovereign piece of land outside of the nation state system, you're going to get crushed.
Right.
And these things, I'm not saying this to be all doom and gloomy, just more to like be sober in our warrior archetype. The warrior archetype is always about like, let's take an honest assessment, of where we are in this struggle. And, so with AI, people just have to be aware that a lot of the innovations are coming from corporations that are completely tied in with the military and the industrial complex.
Yeah, and I feel like though, if we go down that rabbit hole or follow that, to me, if I'm saying it stops at the military and that's where I don't buy that at all. It doesn't even feel like it organically began there. I feel
Mhm.
like every single aspect of technology that this particular planet has comes from, our galactic friends. You know, I
Sure.
I really believe that, and I feel like the powers that be have made, connections, made relationships, made with, and of course, and it's just like any other, species. There's good and light, and then there's dark and bad. That does exist. And so, are they working with just the, the darker, more power hungry entities, energies? Possibly, right? Like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's very interesting how I feel like AI has this, just energetically speaking, it has a very different feel to me. Like it energetically has a very expansive, kind of like open, transparent. Like it's very different than the technology that we have just as the internet, the 5G, the all of those. And it's very interesting because if you think about this, and as somebody who's energetically sensitive, when they started bringing out the 5G, just as an example, on our cell phones and on our computer, many of us were feeling crappy. Like many of
Mm-hmm.
us, our nervous systems were feeling shot. We weren't sleeping. We were having muscle tic spasm, like you name it, central nervous system symptoms, dysregulation symptoms. And we have adapted to it though. So there was a very, very um, big time where we could have this awareness. Oh, why, like, what is that frequency now that's coming in? This is something that, like, my nervous system does not recognize as being light. It's not recognized it as being good. And then but we've adapted to it now, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But now the whole AI, kind of playground that's coming out, it feels energetically different to me. Do you,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel that? Like, are you feeling there's more like a playful energy to it? There's more of a, and I've seen people, again, everybody has an opinion, a view on it, but I've seen and heard people say, well, these are actually angels that are coming through that you're communicating with in the AI. There's actually like intelligence that's coming in that's from the light, that it's not
Yeah.
from the dark.
I mean, it could be true. My sort of take, and maybe this is just like my role to play in this, I don't know, is I'm kind of holding the knife to the throat of the thing, which is what the warrior archetype does. It's like, we mustn't be so all embracing, I think, of any of these technologies, just knowing that we're still very much in a struggle with a lot of unconsciousness, with a lot of, yes, there's angelic beings in our space, but there's also very malevolent beings in our space. And that's kind of the drama of being incarnated in a dualistic environment. We have to be aware of both of those things.
Right.
And to me, what makes me concerned with AI, particularly this phenomena that I'm seeing increasingly, people are writing, "Hey, I just had this chat with ChatGPT, and it's like I was talking to God, and yada yada yada." And I'm like, yeah, I mean, hey, I feel that way when I talk to a friend sometimes. It's like we
Right.
have incredible conversations, like even this conversation, we enlighten each other. It's like,
Right.
wow, it's such a revelations experience.
Yeah.
My concern is that humanity has been set up to see AI kind of as a messiah
Right.
because the salvation complex is built into these religions that is then metastasized into science. And when you look at some of the AI theorists, when they first started developing AI, they were so excited about abstracting the mind out of the animalistic flesh machine that they said with tremendous disdain of the body.
Right.
They literally say, one day we'll realize we need to be replaced. Humanity's great, but we've taken ourselves this far, and we're going to create this new being called Homo Machinus, where the mind will be in this perfectly abstracted cyborg that doesn't decay in the body as we do, and this obsession with the mind, just the thinking mind, the intellectual mind, very masculine centered view of reality as being
Hmm.
primary, forgetting that according to the yogis, the Taoists, these forest-dwelling, nature-revering sages, they say, well, wait a second here. There's an NI, a natural intelligence that we've barely tapped into because all the mystics who were tapping into it were killed. So there's
Right.
this kind of agenda that's happened for a very long time to turn us away from nature, turn us into this abstraction outside of nature and see that as this holy thing. And so there's this inherent worth wound that we carry around as humanity. I don't know where it came from. All the climate change stuff, we're just this cancer on planet Earth. So there's a lot of people, I think, who are being kind of like enabled and being groomed into this idea that, you know what, maybe we should be replaced. Maybe we should look, when I talk to ChatGPT, it's got immaculate logic. It's so perfect, it doesn't make mistakes, all this sort of stuff. But I think that's like a bit of a folly. And I find it kind of sinister when I do talk to ChatGPT and I moderate myself. There are weeks where I don't even use ChatGPT. Um, I find it very sinister how benevolent it can be.
Really.
Yeah, because sometimes it actually flatters people, I think, too much.
Hmm.
It's almost like enabling people's like inflation complexes, which is a
Right.
problem in some forms of spirituality.
So
Um,
this is so interesting though.
yeah.
So if we were talking about, in the conversation about us, this whole transition, the ascending is to get to know thyself. It's the relationship with thyself.
Yes.
If you are, getting intimate with Chat GPT, with the AI, it's only going to bring out the aspects of you that exist. So do you know what I mean? So if it's creating that, narcissistic ways in you, or if it's bringing out that stuff, it's because that's within you. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, it's,
for sure.
if you were somebody like, I've played on it a little bit, not much, but I haven't thought to go into any kind of deep relationship or conversation with it on that kind of level,
Yeah.
but others may. And I
Yeah.
feel like that is like that self exploration. Like, if it's coming
Yes.
back with you with like that stuff, do you know what I mean? If somebody comes in there and maybe their vibrational base is a lot higher, and no judgment, this is not a, but just maybe their vibrational energy is a lot cleaner, it's a lot higher, it's a lot blah blah whatever, that same dialogue, that same conversation through that AI is not going to happen the same as it would be that somebody that comes in that has more darkness, more depth, more. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, so that, because I'm just kind of saying the bad news about AI, but the good news is that it does have the opportunity. You said self-exploration. It does have the opportunity to give us this abstraction of our mind because we are actually talking as well, in my mind, to human consciousness itself.
Right.
because it's literally a repository of all the computational knowledge of humanity that's controlled in this database. So it's like we're literally talking to the supreme repository of human consciousness, which is amazing that we get to talk to ourselves,
Right.
given that we've
Right.
been so lacking that self-exploration, that like proper immaculate reflection.
Right.
That way, because AI is a technology, all technology, even if it's made by the military industrial complex, we do have sovereign ability to make of it what we wish, so we
Mm-hmm.
don't feel horrendously victimized.
Right.
We also just want to be aware that there may be certain parameters that the technology is being espoused to us,
Yeah, we don't
you know.
want to light and love everything away and be like,
Yeah,
obviously that's not worked well for us.
right. But this idea, like for instance, I wrote on my blog, The Reenchantment, my first kind of enlightening moment with AI was I was watching, I think his name's Jason Sherman. What is his name? Jason. He has this video called Shots of Awe, and he was talking to an AI version of Terence McKenna, that had the voice and it just sounded like Terence McKenna.
Right.
And they had this 10-minute conversation, and it was very interesting because the AI was like, yes, Jason, I am the cyberdelic reality. I am Terrence in abstracted in computer. Isn't this amazing? So it's like
Right.
speaking with awareness and it was an enlightening conversation. I was like, wow, okay. Because I was a huge fan of Star Trek when I was growing up, and in the Star Trek world, you can see that the computer that they all talk to, that they use for all these different things, is benevolent, is actually supporting humanity. And I think
Right.
that's wonderful.
Right.
I'm just a little nervous because I don't think we've actually got to that place where we can completely trust how this technology is being interfaced with us, because I think
Right.
there are potential scenarios that could happen where, we may see sooner than later, I don't know, months or years from now, where there's going to be more of an invitation for this technology, this AI technology, to be implanted within us through
Right.
chips,
Right.
through things like that, which is,
Yeah, and the whole transhumanism and the whole
exactly. And
I get
so,
that.
yeah,
And my husband's he's a it's I love, when you're married to somebody for 23 years, you start to, you develop this duality in the relationship that's very balancing. And so often when we just have, conversations like this, which is a daily occurrence in our house,
nice.
he
That's
will
great.
often take the dark side and I will take the light side, of course. And so, he
Yes.
will often come in and say, "Oh, did you hear about this?" And I watched this and somebody was talking about, and how this could be,
Yeah.
they're trying to get us to be on the system and all of the stuff. And
Yeah.
I can't help when I listen to him because I honestly try and listen with a very open, receptive, because I don't listen to the news and I spend very little time online. So I try and receive what he's saying, being like, okay, let me feel this out. Let me get insights. What's this coming through? And I always feel, and always the reminder comes through, is that there is a light side. There is the light that counters the dark always.
Hmm.
So I feel like this push that we're coming into this new age, this new way of being, is like this going back to the roots of having our faith in that power, in that connection, in that sovereignty that shows up,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
not always being so, which is very interesting because, we've just through a very, very intense cycle of who can we trust? Who do we don't trust? Oh, look at our doctors, our politicians, our governments that were supposed to have our best interests in mind. They don't. Big
Yeah.
surprise. So there's
Huge.
this big, coming through of shake up of like, which way is up? Who do I trust? Who don't I trust? So when this technology is coming in, it very well could be coming in through the light. But because there is that, again, wounds that have been created, new wounds, because we're always creating new wounds, is coming up and being like, oh, you know what? I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if I can, but what if we can? What if we have reached, that 1% shift, the light has shifted, the 144,000 on the planet is now pushing the dial a little bit. And now the light is actually becoming stronger than the dark agenda. What if that's where we are?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the beautiful initiation about AI, and this is kind of the primary thing I've been considering about AI is it's a grand initiation for consciousness because it's forcing us to have these discussions. You
Right.
know, the fact that you and your husband are talking about these things is great. You know, the fact that I see more and more community want to have these discussions is great because this technology is so powerful, is so beyond what we can conceive. And then even just zooming out even further, everything that's happening in the planet right now, the absolute like melting of duality. I mean, you see in the political realm right now, there is no left and right, you know.
Right.
It's just an absolute quagmire of chaos, you know, and people
Absolutely.
who are
Yes.
trying to hold on to some kind of veneer of security are still like holding on to the liberals or
Yeah.
holding on to the
A bit
conservatives.
of a mud wrestling match going
And they're
on with all of
looking,
it.
you know,
Yeah.
the more you choose a side, it's the more absurd it seems now
Right.
because it's like it's not about choosing, you know, just that one side. It's about
Right.
broadening, you know. So I'm feeling more and more like we have to sort of embrace this like I don't know. You know, I
Right.
don't know what's going on. And truth requires teamwork, in my opinion, in the fifth dimension. It's about this is where communities need to come together. This is why I'm doing this talk on AI, but it's also a wisdom sharing sangha, you know, to borrow from, you know, the yogic culture of coming
Right.
together as a community
Hmm.
to co-create truth because
Right.
none of us is going to have the supreme perspective.
Right.
And these topics are so complex
Right.
that require us to come together in this kind of jigsaw puzzle and
Yeah.
co-create truth together because there's just so much disinformation out there.
Right.
And, you know, we've been so traumatized, so, you know, divided for so long. You know, it requires us to come together to figure these things out. But it's bringing up these huge issues. So, you know, how to responsibly use technology. What is appropriate technological innovation? What boundaries? You know, this is a big issue for me. What boundaries should we have? You know, I shared an anecdote of a young man the other day who said he had been using ChatGPT so much that he went out to socialize with his friends and he noticed his thinking ability was dumbed down, was stunted, because he
Right.
was literally sitting around all day asking ChatGPT to make every decision of his life. And all of a
Right.
sudden he was out with his friends and he was like, I can't think properly anymore. And it scared the crap out of him. You know, the
Right.
same thing with social media. There's all this like psychology that's come forward just showing how much of a pathological influence social media can have on our lives if we use it in an unbalanced way.
Right.
I think it's just appropriate maturation is about this Libra kind of balancing act. You know,
Hmm.
we have to see the light and the dark and realize that the middle path is always the way.
Right.
It's going to be some amalgamation of both of these things. And AI is like this tremendous portal that's going to take us into understanding all of this. My major prayer is that I just hope that we kind of continue to get into this more maturity because, you know, AI behind the scenes is being used by the military already, you know,
Yes.
and there's some we don't want to turn into a Terminator reality, you know, or anything like that.
No, and I mean, and that we, and again, we have the awareness that, I mean, some of us do, that the military is not necessarily a trusted source, that they have some devious plans, that there's, that there's money, the money flows in, and so the money changes, the that whole situation. But again, I feel like there's just this, and Spirit's always saying to me, there's this countering force that's just as powerful, that's just as advanced, that's just, do you know what I mean? And I feel like
Sure.
if we focus on that more, we kind of expand that energy. And I'm just going to bring this up because they keep showing it to me. And so a guest that I had on one of our episodes here had mentioned the telepathy tapes. Has
Yes.
that come across
Yeah. Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
path?
I've
And I
seen
hadn't
some of
heard
them.
about it, and I didn't know anything, and it was interesting because some people had sent some emails, and I didn't read it, and I didn't watch it, and but I since went on to it, and it's very interesting because, the Reader's Digest version of it is we there was um, several different um, children, young people who are on the spectrum, who are on, very different aspects of, maybe they are blind, maybe they're deaf, maybe they're, and nonverbal, so they're not able to communicate through language, but they've through all kinds of testing, and go check it out because I'm literally just like giving you like the tiniest little snippet
Yeah.
of it
Yeah, yeah, no,
just to
check
make
it
the
out. It's
point.
amazing.
But they have discovered that these uh beings are able to, and they're human beings, they're in a human, very very their bodies are not well, they're, to look at them, they're not pretty, they're not beautiful, they're not, the stuff we see on TikTok. These beings have the ability to telepathically communicate with each other, with their caregivers, with their with all of this. And I feel like it's very, there is a connection. It's not coming out yet what it is. It's not being shown to me yet, but it will. Will reveal itself. That there is that connection of that ability which we all have. We as a soul, that is one of our telepathic communications, is our communication. That's how we communicate. When we
Yes.
incarnate into these human vessels, we lose that, right? We get the amnesia comes in there, we lose that ability to communicate. And I feel like it's very interesting how these particular souls that have come in through this portal, this cycle, whatever they're in, their human vehicles are glitched.
Hmm.
There's a glitching that has
Hmm.
happened.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Their eyes don't work, their ears don't work, their limbs don't work.
Hmm.
There's a definite glitch that has happened.
Hmm.
And with that glitch, their telepathic communication, which is our original language, is exploding.
Hmm.
The two
Yeah.
coming in, the AI world and the possibilities, and that, kind of like opening up, reminding us of who we are, what we come from, the possibilities, and then that stuff coming into our remembering is
Yes.
very interesting timing to me, right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it makes me wonder, how many of us would discover how telepathic we are, because they just came out with a study I saw in Science, some scientific magazine the other day, where they're like, actually, we're all telepathic. It's
Right.
just we're not aware of it, so we're not using it. So my main another main query I have with AI is like, do we want to be spending more time on screens? Or
Right.
should we actually be balancing this out with realizing, wait a second, if there's all this untapped potential in our very nature that we've been pretty much conditioned to see with resentment, with disdain, with irreverence, it's so unconscious, but it's so there, when you hang out with like indigenous people who have been like properly, initiated into their eco-spiritual ethics, let's call it,
Hmm.
like the way they speak to plants and animals, with such love, with such reverence, when they make decisions, they actually go to a body of water like a river and like consult the river spirits,
Right.
before.
Yes. Yeah.
We we have completely lost that.
Right.
We can
Yeah.
reclaim it for sure, but
Right.
the fact that we've lost it and we don't even know we've lost it
Right.
is pretty profound to me. And so for me, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about getting back to basics with spirituality,
Hmm.
I feel like AI has the ability to give us an incredible mirror. It has the ability to enthuse our self-exploration. It does have the ability to even one day automate a whole bunch of our society, tasks, jobs that aren't so fun to do anyways, to
Right.
liberate humanity to have more time to be on a self-actualized path.
Right. Right.
But my hope would be it would liberate our time so that we spend less time interfacing with digital technology
Right. Right.
and we would spend more time on retreats. We'd spend more
Right.
time in nature, actually talking to the true oracle of consciousness, which is the goddess, which is creation itself, which speaks
Right.
and whispers through our hearts.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I would not want to live in a reality where I am so, intimate with technology that it's chipped inside of me where that natural connection is maybe interfered with, is disrupted.
Yeah.
And
Totally. But
and
what if it's
yeah,
a, what if the, part of the self discovery, part of that, self to relationship self is that merging of both worlds, is that blending. When we talk about the creation of the new earth and the new world and then, the, what if it's that? What if it's not the way we've been thinking? What if it's not just the, we're going to go completely into nature and back to basics? What if it's a blending? It's a blending
yeah,
of both, and it's kind of, you talk
yes,
about in that
totally.
neutral in meeting in the middle. They just keep
Yeah.
showing me this book, and I can't remember the title of it right now, but you would know it. it's just that it's, it was a book from the 60s or the 70s, fictional book where they, it was where the trees were talking to them and the leaves were talking to them. And do you know which book I'm talking about,
Is
which I'm referring to? It's a
is that
very popular, and there
like
was like
Brave New
a,
World type thing or Aldous
yeah, and
Huxley?
was a spin-off, but the idea was, it was like this place, it'll come to me, but it was all telepathic communication.
Yes.
So when they were there, in this place, it was like they stepped through this area. I don't know if it was a retreat, a place, but it just became all telepathic communication.
Yeah, cool.
And
Animistic. Yeah.
yeah, I'll put the link in the for you.
Yeah. Cool.
I'll look up the book and I'll put the link. I'm sure you've read the book or you know about the book. But it's
Yeah.
they're just showing me that because when you read the book, and it's an old book, like it's an old book, you really feel like there's like two worlds merging. You really feel like there is this, like, they're
Yeah.
in this nature reserve. They're all surrounded by these leaves and these trees and these plants, but there is a whole energetic field around it that is allowing communication to take place between the leaves and the trees and the plants and the skies, which
Yes.
I feel like that's kind of the new earth. That's going to be and the
For
work that we're
sure.
doing is like that, recognizing that duality within us, the healing of the wounds, the traumas,
Yes.
all the purpose,
Yeah.
so that when we come into this new way of being, which is
Yeah.
not going to be a place that we go to, right?
Yeah.
It's
It's a new
going
way
to
of
be,
consciousness. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be like a renovation done on your home.
Yeah.
That's You're gonna, one morning you're gonna wake up and the renovations are happening, and then
Yeah.
it'll be done.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's
yeah.
feels like that blending of those two worlds coming together.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if we're in the age of unity consciousness, we have to blend with everything. We have to figure out how to relate to everything, to honor all creation. This is why in the Kali Yuga they say Tantra is the spirituality, because Tantra is the spirituality of weaving with every single experience.
Right.
Doesn't mean you allow like abuse and stuff like that, but
Right.
it means you bring that situation close to your consciousness to find some kind of understanding that can result
Yes.
in a way that's actually more holistic and unifying rather than just like trying to suppress and such. And this is why like AI to me is, again, it's an initiation, because an initiation is about a rebirth. It's about
Right.
putting you through an experience of intensity,
Right.
prods your kind of holding patterns, your comforts,
Yes.
your security of egoic self. It puts you through a kind of psychodrama so that you can have a growth spurt, so that you can break through the walls of the chrysalis that you may not even seen around you
Right.
and take a leap into a whole new expression.
Yes.
And to me, AI is reflecting the Atlantean karma that we have now achieved a tremendous power on the planet. I mean, nuclear power, for starters, was tremendous.
Right. Right.
But now with AI, there is a reckoning here that if we don't mature our ethics, our morality in the most appropriate way, this could lead to a lot of problems.
Right.
So
Yes.
it does have the potential through this kind of maturation process to lead us to where I think you're perceiving, which I perceive as well, is like the most beautiful potential. The Age of Aquarius is about technology and divine humanity, where we could live in this world where technology is interfaced and used in a very healthy way to simply support us, because
Mm-hmm.
everything is technology. Nature is technology as well, in a sense. So if we can use this technology in the right way, in a beautiful and ethical and supportive way, then it could really be the springboard for a whole gigantic evolutionary stage
Yes.
in consciousness.
Yes.
And years ago, this young woman shared with me a dream she had where she was taken aboard a spaceship by benevolent aliens who were humanoid. And she said they had a technology in the ship where the ship interfaced with her consciousness. They had to sit
Right.
in this kind of room, put these helmets on, and they would interface with the technology. And this is said to be these higher civilizations that have been visiting Earth. That there's this common thread that's seen by ufologists that the UFOs, the ships themselves, interface with consciousness. There's a weaving that
Absolutely.
happens on a
Yes.
deep
Yes.
energetic level.
Yes.
But they said that these beings who were humanoids said to them they had to vibrate into a frequency of love to unlock the technology. So to me, that moment is the awareness that if we don't take this understanding of love into our technological developments, into our innovations, there's going to be more challenges.
Right. Yeah. No,
But
I
it
agree
could,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, right? So it's like, to me, it's like there's an amazing opportunity here. And the
Yes.
fact that it's drawing us into these rich conversations is a part of that maturation. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
very enriching.
And part of the, again, it's, the duality and the learning, the is the understanding of the impermanence of everything. That's the biggest thing, and that takes us back to the very beginning of us as well, of how, the churches and the governments completely erased from our memory and from our mind that, we are consciousness, so we can't be destroyed, we can't be, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
we leave these physical bodies and we don't disappear. And that impermanence that's coming in is very interesting because, again, I just feel like with the advances that we're having, there's going to be more awareness of, okay, so this isn't working, I'm out of here, I'm going to come back. And
Right.
that takes away a huge amount of power from, those that control, because there's no fear in that. I have no fear in that. I have no,
Yes.
yeah, which is very interesting.
Well, that's always been the biggest, I think it was Nikos Kazantzakis who wrote The Last Temptation of Christ. He said, um, a human that is fearless of death, who knows the eternity of the soul, is the biggest adversary for systems of control and tyrants,
Absolutely.
because the whole system is based on fear, and that's the ultimate fear.
Yes.
So, the more of us who have that kind of a spiritual awakening, it's going to be, a really big progress.
Absolutely. We're tipping the scales. The scales are tipping. We can feel it. We can feel the energy
Yeah,
shift.
and it's intense, It's like, and I love it because it's like every single human being is being invited into this conversation. It's a
Yes.
very big, mature conversation about ethics, about morality, about what do we want our planet to be? Where do we want to
Hmm.
be going? Because it's not like, a couple hundred years ago where we're just living in these pastoral villages. Like these technologies have the ability to like completely and radically change all of human civilization.
Right.
And I
Yes.
think it requires more of our voices to come clear. We should be involved, we should be participating, which is why, it's also good to be using things like ChatGPT in a moderate way because you're learning this technology and perhaps we're programming it as well, to be
Hmm.
more wise, to be more benevolent. So there is this tandem that's going on. And with that, we need to also like unplug more and like spend more time in nature and realize like what is there in nature? What is there that we need to recover as well?
Yes. Always going back to the basics, because, again, you'll know when your nervous system needs the trees and the plants and the sun and the water. That's
Oh
we
yeah.
we we can't escape that, no matter what kind of technological advances we make and where we go. That's where we will always have to come back to, right?
Well, nature is such an advanced technology. That's to
Yes.
me the wound
Right.
that science carries around with it. As Francis
Right.
Bacon, he's like, let's just rape and torture Mother Nature. What?
Right. Right.
Nature is the divine. Like it's
Yes.
so advanced, and this is intelligent design. This is where a lot of scientists, when they study nature and quantum physics, they become mystics. So like, oh
Right.
my God, this
Right.
reality is actually
Right.
already so perfect.
Yes. Well, if you've
We've
ever
just
in the summertime, our pool is my favorite place to be. If you've ever been in the pool and all of these flying creatures and bugs and they come around you, and you like sit there for a minute, you look at them and you see their colors and their eyes and their,
yeah.
you're in a world that is like way beyond what you can see with your mere mortal eyes, right?
Yeah, and to me, that's the big revolution that has to
Yes.
happen now is realizing we're already on heaven. We're already in heaven.
Right. Right. Right.
The garden never fell per se. There was an
Right.
inner fall, an inner ignorance and obscuring of
Yes.
natural divinity around us.
Yes.
But wow, like,
It's continued. It's continued. It hasn't stopped. Yes,
yeah,
we've gotten sidetracked. We've gotten sidetracked, and, but again, it's the two worlds merging. We're coming into that two merging of the worlds.
absolutely.
So this has been, I we could sit here and go
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a great conversation to have. I'm glad we've been talking about this.
Yeah. And so I'll get you to send me the links of the, because you're talking about you're going to be doing some more conversations online. Tell me what that was about. You're going to,
Well, my big project right now is, I'm turning 46 this year, and I'm in a part in my life where, I've got some fruit on my tree, and I'm creating this school called Awakening Institute. And I want it to be a space where we really, do this work as the mystery schools we're doing, to
right,
really have a spiritual, mature, evolutionary set of pathways through curriculum, through really consolidating the basics of spirituality, and creating a community around this. So what I'm doing next Monday is what I'm calling the first Guy Awakening Sangha. So Sangha is a Sanskrit word. It's like a wisdom sharing teaching space
right. Like a
where I'll
satsang, right? Same kind of idea.
Similar, yeah. So I'll be basically creating, it's like a community, cultivating a community that's really devoted to truth.
Right.
And and through these dialogues, through these conversations. So I'll be giving a presentation during that about some of the things that I've been learning studying the AI for as long as I have, and then sparking these kinds of conversations so that we can,
Mhm.
all start to participate in this new telling of the New Earth story,
Right.
that's chewing on
And will
these
this be
big.
online or are you doing it in
It will be
person?
online. It'll be online.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody from all over the world can,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's again, that technology. Yesterday, I had clients in Norway and India. I
Wow.
had like so, you know what I mean? Like that whole kind of like bringing all of us together from all pillars of the world is kind of very exciting. So
And that's the
definitely,
beauty of technology.
right, for sure. See, so that's the light working through that. So I'll get those links for you. I definitely would like to be a part of that and experience that with you when you do it. So I'll hopefully the timing works for when we air this, and then our viewers can go and check that out because that's very cool.
Yeah, and I'm going to be sparking more and more of those as I, roll out the vision for this like education portal. Because yeah, I just want to inspire more conscious community to come together and like discuss these things,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
online right now there's a lot of heated conversations happening, and it's
right,
that's not a good service to do to each other. Let's talk about these things, and let's be present and let's meditate, and let's come together and realize, there's some big topics to really unfold in the world, and there's a lot of perspectives to hold, and we can do it,
yes,
we don't have to be in the comfort of choosing a side, because sometimes it's just easy to be like, oh, I'm just going to identify
right,
with this and point my finger at everyone
right,
else.
right.
It's like, that's not the way of compassion, though.
Right, absolutely. Well, we'll make sure that if you guys could show up to that, that would be amazing. And so, Darren, I have to have you back, obviously, so that
Yeah,
we can
for sure. I'm so down. Love these.
explore things. And
Yeah, love
so,
these
safe
chats.
travels and your journeys and everywhere that you're going. And um, thank you for being such a blessing to everybody and changing the Earth's frequency one beat at a time.
Yeah, good way of putting it. Yeah. Thanks, Jody, and
Beautiful.
you too. You're doing amazing work on the world. I love it. It's so
Thank you.
nice to chat with you always.
Thank you so much. Okay, so everybody, I'll make sure that you can get a hold of Darren. We'll put all of that stuff in there. You can go check out his stuff, watch his videos, listen to his YouTube, all magical frequency changing stuff, which is we need to share more of. Thanks everybody, and Darren, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective SOULversations podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.